So a few weeks ago, I made a video talking about what servants you should consider picking on the SR ticket that we're going to be getting in about 3 weeks-ish, give or take, maybe 2 weeks if we're super lucky, and they want to give us the 25 million download campaign really early, but I thought it would be very helpful to do videos on some of the highlighted servants. So if you're a newer player, or maybe, you just are not a hardcore player, not as in the know, you can get a better feel for why these servants are the top picks, at least in my opinion. Because I didn't want that video to be about an hour long, I really kept my answers very short and sweet, just kind of talking about why they're good and why some other servants just aren't the best. But really, one of the servants that I think is the most standout option, especially for newer players, is Nitocris. So I guess this is more of a servant evaluation and why you should maybe be considering Nitocris for your ticket, rather than a normal servant review, because I think I have a normal servant review for Nitocris on the channel, and if I don't, maybe I'll hop on that at some point when she gets another random raid up. But strap in, get comfortable, drop a like, subscribe if you like that daily FGO content and you like being informed on the goings on both versions of the game. But with that, let's just go ahead and start talking about some of her selling points. And I think there are two major selling points for Nitocris. The first is the massive, enormous battery that she has on her second skill. That even if you have really strong units going into 90 plus and 90 plus content, this can still be kinda useful. Although for those nodes, you might be relying on the other selling point for her, but it is just very, very nice that she has anywhere from a 60% battery at skill level 1 up to a 120% battery at skill level 10. If you're a bit more hurting for skill gems and whatnot, even though they did make it easier to get, EXP cards, skill gems and stuff as a newer player with the new player missions, you can just take her up to skill level 8, and that's 102% battery, meaning she can fully charge her own NP no matter what CE she's got, which is super, super nice. And in some of the background gameplay that I'm going to be showing, I'm demonstrating a couple of different ways that you could use her if you want to try to use her as a raw looper, which I will talk about in a little bit. There are some issues with that, but if you need something, she can get the job done. Or more likely, while they're not the craziest nodes to go fight because the event doesn't really have the most insane nodes out available yet, but they are still nodes, and you can kind of see the premise of, okay, well, I can dump everything into Nitocris to get her up to 100% of her battery. She can clear wave 1, then she fires her second skill and she can clear wave 2, and then any unit of my choice, which in some of the ones, I think I use like Space Ishtar just because with the 60% from Castoria and no starting charge CE, her own 50% battery can get her up to 100%. But obviously results may vary depending on if, you got somebody within a pen skill and a 30% battery, or they have a 40% battery, which I know is a bit more rare. In fact, I don't really know if we have anybody with a 40% battery that I can recall off the top of my head, but you get what I'm saying. There's different ways that you can use such a large battery to your disposal. Now, a lot of people will be thinking, well, can't I use her as a farming servant because she's an AoE art servant? And technically, yes, you can, and she can kind of do a good job at that. I think I've brought her against, enough varying classes that you can kind of get a gauge for her NP refund, but the problem is it's gonna be a little bit inconsistent, and that's because of her first gimmick. The main thing that you really know Nitocris for, besides the battery, is her insta-kill mechanic based on her first skill and the overcharge on her NP. Now, normally, insta-kill is not super great because if you're trying to insta-kill a servant or a boss, their death rate is so low that it's borderline impossible to proc it. I know there's like a few instances in my entirety of playing FGO that I think I've seen a servant been insta-killed, and it's not been from me. I think I got one, but I'm not sure if I'm just gaslighting myself into believing that I had one, because I seem to remember having a crazy thing on stream, but again, I might be misremembering. It's super, super rare, to put it bluntly. But that is not true for the bronze, silver, and even some of the gold enemies that you find. And that's not, their actual color, that's their rarity, because usually the higher the rarity goes, the lower their death rate is going to be, i.e. it's going to be harder to insta-kill them. But there are some, gold ranked enemies. Think of your demons, your sphinxes, stuff like that. You'll see some of those guys, and it's not impossible for her to even get insta-kills on them. I would say bronze are borderline guaranteed, silvers are fairly guaranteed, and gold enemies, you could see with some regularity, especially if you have stuff like, say, Demonic Bodhisattva, or say you have someone like Himiko, I guess, in your party that can overcharge your NP levels to raise her overcharge on her own NP, which is her chance to insta-kill. Again, I'm not saying that you have to use Himiko with her, I'm just throwing out the first person that came to my mind. But that, in conjunction with her first skill, really does up the chances and allows her to pretty consistently insta-kill enemies. And because they slapped an arts buff on that skill as well, it's not a whole lot, but technically it is 30% because she has 20% from the first skill and 10% from her passives. Even if she doesn't insta-kill people, she can do, I'm gonna say, decent enough damage. Obviously not super crazy. You are not going to be using Nitocris as a DPS farmer by any stretch of the imagination, but usually if she whiffs on an insta-kill and you're bringing her for that, she can do a fair, decent bit of damage to the enemy, and she might even take them out. I brought her to a couple of dailies as well, and she was still able to get through that just fine. So if the enemies are, let's say, reasonably sized, around like the 150k range, and you've got maybe even a couple extra bonus NP copies into her, she'll actually be able to take these guys out with relative consistency. But again, the selling point is massive battery. She can usually clear 2 waves on her own, but even if they're too big for her to take out, she has a very strong chance of insta-killing them. And again, there are CEs that you can pair with her that are very nice. Again, something like Demonic Bodhisattva that's already starting her at 50%. So, someone like only one Castoria can get her up to 100%, and you can use the targetable buff from, say, a second Castoria on a different unit in the CQ or farming stage, whatever have you. And I think this makes her a very strong candidate for not only newer players, but also for more veteran players. If you have not gotten your grubby little mitts on Nitocris yet, I would highly consider making her one of your picks. Now, obviously, I'm going to probably talk about people like Emiya and, Salter and some of these other servants that I think are also really good picks. But I think if you just want the safest, overall best choice, I think you just can't go wrong with Nitocris, because even for someone like Saber Alter, you gotta wait about 2 years for her to get her buff, for her to be really, really strong, because she will be very good once she gets that buff. You just gotta wait because of our large gap with JP. And Emiya can be a little weird to use as a newer player, because you want to use him as like a one-turn arts AoE looper that then goes into a buster loop, and it can be a little bit weird for newer players. Not that he's bad by any stretch of the imagination, he's still very, very good. I just don't know if that's going to be as conducive to newer players, and really even veteran players alike, than having somebody that can pull you out of a really tight jam in a 90 plus or even a 90 plus node, as I've seen in some of the more recent ones that we've had over on JP. One of my own friends even brought Nitocris to one of the stages and would just use them to reliably get through one part of the wave. And they've been playing the JP side of things for years, and they still can break out Nitocris and get a lot of help for that, which I guess is more of a veteran free-to-play player angle that you're looking at that from, because let's say you're a whale and you've got like NP5 archetype Earth on JP, you're probably just going to be slamming your head into everything, and then if it's not a chaotic enemy that you have power mod for, you just pull out someone who does have the power mod, right? And you gas them up with Oberon. So maybe if you're a whale, Nitocris loses a little bit of her luster, but then even at that point, if you're a whale, but you don't whale on like every single banner and you don't have literally every single unit in the game, she might be able to fit those niche corner cases that even you as a whale might find. And so I'm really willing to go to bat for Nitocris because I just think she's that good. Go figure, having a really good gimmick in being able to insta-kill decently sized mobs that you might not be able to take care of, and then also being able to do that for 2 waves potentially because of her over 100% battery, and then people like Castoria being in the game that can get her through the first wave or something like that. I think that's really nice, and I think it's super helpful to really all players. I think it might benefit you more as a newer player because it's just a servant with a big battery that can kind of just bonk some of the early game enemies and even some of the lost belt enemies that you might encounter and just kind of wave them away and be like, all right, let's just get through this chattel, you know, let's just kind of insta-kill all these guys. But again, if you're looking at this from more of a veteran player's perspective, it's someone that can help get you through some of the harder farming nodes that you might not have the appropriate servant to take down. But I think I've said my piece. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I would also make one of these for Hephaestion, but she just came out, and I think I defended her really well, but I also think on the single target side of things, Hephaestion also has a pretty strong case. It's just Nitocris can get around the fact that, well, you're picking up this servant for the first time, they're probably going to be stuck at NP1 unless you're specifically going for dupes, and Nitocris is really strong because she doesn't need dupes because of how her mechanic works and how she's going to insta-kill people, which doesn't matter, which I guess I should have touched up on the farming thing. The reason she can be a little janky for farming is that the insta-kill procs first, meaning she doesn't actually hit the enemy if she does insta-kill them, and so she doesn't get any refund back. But as you've kind of seen, you can get through some of these. I mean, I was farming the dailies, which is not the craziest thing ever, I know, but you know, against casters that have decent refund and only insta-killing one of them in the node, she was still able to get through relatively okay. I mean, I didn't even have to bring Oberon for it. I just kind of brought Oberon assuming that she was going to insta-kill all over the place. I could have brought a waiver because she had over 50% NP, so I guess that's more free-to-play friendly technically, but again, I don't want to ramble too much on Nitocris. She can be a looper for you, but it's very, very janky, so keep that one in mind. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one. If you have any other thoughts for any of the other SR ticket contenders that you think maybe I should also spotlight, let me know that in the comments down below as well, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late.